Jesus says, "You have heard it said to those in those ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with your brother or sister, you must be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gifts." The phrase that absolutely flies off the page here is in verse 24. First, be reconciled. Listen to 23 and 24 again. "So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift." As we've said over the last few weeks, the Sermon on the Mount, it's a theological masterclass. Jesus tells us a lot about God and the kingdom of God, but what we see today is that there is also this practical aspect to it. Jesus is very much concerned about, and now this is how you need to go and live. You've heard it said, but I say to you. You've heard it said, but I say to you. Jesus is bringing a new kingdom to the world, and he wants the world to notice. He wants the religious elite, the have and have-nots, to see a physical change in what the people of God look like and act like. I mean, the kingdom of God is coming, and those who have eyes to see it, they're going to respond differently in the world. And this is still true today, by the way. God's people are to be more than just those who follow the Old Testament laws. And look at verse 21. "You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment.' But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire." As you know, I was gone out of the country last week. I went on a scouting trip with 5 other Baptist pastors to South Africa. Over the last 10 years, we've been in partnership with missionaries and ministries over there, and pre-COVID, we even sent multiple groups. Well, we're in a network with these other churches, and Jane and Gavin are going to lead a team this summer with a group of our youth and also adults. It was my first time to South Africa, and it didn't take the people long to figure that out. I stuck out. I often got asked about what I thought about the country, and this kind of became my line. It's an unbelievably beautiful place, deeply spiritual. You feel it in your feet. It's holy ground. We met a woman who runs a safe house for mothers and their children escaping domestic abuse. She and her caregivers were an inspiration. We met with a nurse practitioner who serves those who can't pay for medical care in a community that's ravaged with sickness and HIV. We met with a group called Door of Hope, who are actively saving abandoned children and currently working on building a village for them to grow and prosper. We met with one of the kindest pastors in the world who is training other pastors and offering hope to a community. We met with foster care agencies and nonprofits who are doing their best to assist children, educate, and love families who've contracted HIV, as well as working with missionaries who partner in order to spread the gospel to those who've never heard it. Each person that we met had such deep faith. They believed God was their source of strength, and they were all trying in one way or another to help their clients reconcile with their past, with their trauma, with their diagnosis, and even with their disease or enemy. I learned that these missionaries don't need us in order to keep doing their good work, but they want us to come alongside. They have the capacity to let us partner and help. As one lady said, our faith links us together like a chain. We are all part of helping humanity heal. Such a conscious statement. South African people understand deeply God in relation to humanity. You feel it in your feet. And I think it's because they deeply understand what Jesus means when he says to go and be reconciled. In 1995, South Africa started the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was a court-like body established by the government to help heal the country and bring about a reconciliation of its people by uncovering the truth about human rights violations that had occurred during the period of apartheid. The commission, it allowed victims the opportunity to tell their story as the government collected an impartial historical record of the past and then drafted a reparations policy. And when I learned this, that's when South Africa became holy ground for me. As you know, we're in the middle of a sermon series on my story, our story, the story. We're zooming in on how all of those mean, or how God matters at the individual level, and how God tells us we are beloved through our own story, and that we are also the light of Christ. And the big theological truth that we're finding is that each of the divine levels of engagement, my story, our story, the story, God comes to us and tells us we're beloved. In our story, we are God's beloved. In the collective communal stories, we are told we are God's beloved. And then God comes to us in the global kingdom story. And then we realize that cultures are like links in a chain. And across the world, we're being told we are God's beloved. I felt this truth in South Africa. It's why I kept saying, you feel it in your feet. It's holy ground. The country knows what reconciliation is, and they believe in their bones that God is present in their struggles. And that's exactly what Jesus is communicating in Matthew 5 today. Look at verse 23 again. So when you're offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. To be reconciled is an enormous piece to understanding my story, our story, and the story dynamic. God cares about us being reconciled. God doesn't want us to come and go from worship, or to come and go from within our community, to come and go offering sacrifices and gifts, knowing that a piece of us isn't whole, that there's something broken, that there's something left undone. Paul calls it in his letter to the Corinthians the ministry of reconciliation. Jesus emphasizes it on the mountainside in Matthew 5 to a people who were downtrodden, reminding us that whatever pain we're in, whatever brokenness we're a part of, God will bring healing to it. God is the ultimate reconciler, but we must also pursue it too. We must be people who actively participate in bringing about that healing, who actively seek to reconcile with the world and others and ourselves. On Wednesday nights at Cross Training, we're offering a class called Making Marriage Work. It's research-based findings from the Gottman Institute, which is just one of the best resources for healthy marriages. They teach that there are 7 principles to make marriage work. One of those is the idea of turning towards our partner. The concept is called bidding, and it's really easy to hold, but oh man, does it matter to what Jesus is saying today. We bid in relationships for attention all the time. Anytime we engage our partner, that's a bid. And there are 3 ways in which they respond back towards us. You can turn towards the bid. Your body language, your attitude are open to receiving what your partner wants to say. You can turn against the bid. Your body language and attitude that moves towards the other, but it's angry, or it has a certain level of contempt wrapped in it. You can also turn away from your partner's bid. Your body language and attitude, they don't engage. Your partner tries to tell you something and you're distracted or removed from the moment. That's when relationships are in trouble, because it feels like there's too much distance being created between the partners. Healthy marriages turn towards each other. because that's the only way to be reconciled. Christians have to be people who turn towards each other. I mean, listen to Jesus again in verse 23. So when you're offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. In other words, turn towards your brother or sister. Reconcile with them first. Listen to how they were wounded and own the fact that they may have hurt you too. Tell them, reconcile with them, and then bring your story before God. This is the new way Jesus is teaching the Jews. Imagine what this would look like for all of Israel to tell Rome how they are afflicting them. Imagine how this would shift the power and abuse coming from the religious elite. Jesus is empowering the downtrodden to take their own story, to give it meaning and purpose, to own the fact that you've been hurt and that maybe you've done the hurting and you need to reconcile. Then you're free to go to God. I think the same is true today. God cares about us being reconciled. God doesn't want us to come and go from worship, offering sacrifices and gifts, knowing a piece of us isn't whole, that there's something broken, something left undone. We must seek reconciliation with others and also ourselves. If you really want to find God at the my story and our story level, reconciliation is an absolute must. As some of you know, I played baseball in college. During practice, we played a game called 27 outs. We had to field 27 consecutive outs perfectly. If one person makes an error, everyone drops their gloves and we have to run the length of the field and back. And then we have to start all over at 0. Practice usually ended around 5:30 in the afternoon. Some days we'd be out there until 7 o'clock or past playing 27 outs. When one person makes an error and you have to start over, it's demoralizing. You can feel the collective energy get tense. Everyone does a little worse. You start yelling and bickering and hating one another on the field. When this happens, you've severed moments of trust. And it shows, because then the comedy of errors start coming. If you can live in a way that doesn't sever trust, if you can practice in a way that doesn't hate the other but lifts each other up, forgiving the other for their wrongdoing or their error, then it changes the collective energy of the field. This is what makes team captains so important. They keep the energy up and positive. They own their own mistakes and they help others work harder after mistakes are made. The same has to be true for Christians and our spiritual lives. Jesus is saying people are going to hurt you and wrong you and make errors despite your attempt at making sure they don't. You can't control this. Like in baseball, errors are just part of the game. What you can control is your response to the situation. You can fall apart, isolate yourself, turn away from it, pretend that you're better or more important than the people who make mistakes, but that doesn't solve anything. Plus, it's not true. We all fail. We all make errors. And we all need reconciliation. And we need to be reconciled at the my story, our story, and kingdom level story. And when we seek reconciliation, that's when our soul is open to experiencing God in a way that we feel God's presence around us, even in our feet.